What's going on, guys? This is the 5-Yard Pass podcast with me, Suddy. This is Sham, and we'll be talking about the games. This is the second last round of fixtures, Sham. Talking about the games, Chelsea, Leicester, Liverpool, Burnley, and also a little bit of transfer speculation and King Cantona getting into the Hall of Fame. But I guess we'll start with the games. But it's been a hell of a season, man. We had a few weeks off here because I had a few things to do, a bit of work here and there, but we're back. Mm-hmm. Let's just get straight into it. So we're going Chelsea, Leicester, the battle for third spot, really. You could argue.
It's the battle for fourth spot. Yeah, there's three teams. Tottenham's really out of it. They need a miracle to get there. So it's really two of those three teams will make the Champions League, and Liverpool had the opportunity to win both games, and that would get them in as well. So not a nice thing to say as a United fan, but Liverpool have had a bit of a resurgence. They've won their last three, whereas they look pretty out of it. Big result at United as well to put four past United. So. They've given themselves every chance, Liverpool. So it's probably, funnily enough, even though they're fifth, it's probably in their hands more than anything else because Leicester are playing Chelsea.
Yeah, it's funny because Liverpool seem more beatable than they've ever been. But I think that result against United, and then even more so against West Brom when Alisson scored a few days ago, you just kind of feel like even though they don't have the team they did 2 years ago, you just feel that there is that little bit of, resilience and never say die. There's still something in there.
We were questioning Alisson because he seemed to have these brain fades and run out of goals and miss things. His father passed in Feb. I didn't know that till he scored the winner. They put it in he scored the winner.
Oh, right. No. Yeah. No, I had heard about that actually.
Around that time that he was having those sort of, I don't like saying brain fades, but those moments where he was running
lapses,
headering to opposition players and running in a Kabach and all of that.
Yeah.
He was not quite there because his father, which is a terrible thing to go through. So it's a bit of redemption for him, and that header, any striker would have been proud to score that header. It was a good.
Yeah, they're going to be talked. It's one of those goals, even though it didn't send them to the Champions League straight away, but it'll be talked about for years. The kind of situation, because if they drew that game, well, they'd be on 61 instead of 63, and it just becomes too big of a task.
Yeah, you're relying on a lot more, but I think the thing is as well, goalkeepers have run up and scored equalizers. You don't see goalkeepers running up and scoring winners. That in itself. Yeah. I believe he's the first keeper to ever score a winner in a Premier League game.
Wow. Really?
Yeah, wow. Well, I mean, keepers run up if the scores are equal. Only if, like,
anyway, let's go into the game now. So with Chelsea-Leicester, Chelsea's in a very weird situation where they're kind of battling for the Champions League spot on two fronts. One is in the final, one is in the Premier League. And they've kind of dropped off a little since they beat Man City a few weeks ago. Was that in the? Excuse me, I'm just trying to think here. That was in the Premier League. That was a Premier League game 2 weekends ago, and they're a very good game, but they've just kind of dropped off a little bit, and you just feel Leicester coming off. See what's going for them, in my opinion, is if Leicester will come off a high of winning the FA Cup. They almost feel like we've done what we've come here to do. But how do you see the game kind of panning out? Do you think Leicester will come in with the same energy, or do you think the FA Cup could just, as it does with a lot of teams, you just kind of we could take the attention away for a minute and they could lose this game?
Yeah, so Chelsea's last game, they won 3 in a row before that last game, but they lost to Arsenal, which pretty shocking because Arsenal for some reason have caught fire recently. They've won their last 3. They've gone from bottom half to the top half of the table. That loss has had massive ramifications for Chelsea because you'd almost think that it knocked them about for the FA Cup final. It's put them back into the mix for the top 4. If they'd won that game, they're sitting pretty in third. They'd be looking at this game completely differently. They'd take a draw, for example, whereas they can't take a draw now because Liverpool's coming down their neck. I think it did knock them about for the FA Cup final. I think that it could potentially, the way that this season finishes, they could either have a run and really have a go at it with these last 3 games, or they could just fall apart. So it's a very, very big game. You could almost argue since the FA Cup final, frankly, and I'm very disappointed at this, that it's come down in prestige. Finishing 4th seems a bigger achievement now than winning the FA Cup. And I think that given that, there's so much, their season is riding on this game. Chelsea are not a team that participate in high-scoring matches. You look at their last results, 1-0, 1-0, 2-1, 2-0, 2-0, 1-1. Like, they're quite low-scoring games. And Leicester are not a team that are full of goals. They've scored a fit. Actually, to be honest, actually, they're third in the league for goals scored, but
Mm,
they're not a team that's renowned for scoring a lot. And
mm-hmm,
I think with Vardy seems to have come off the ball a bit. Iniacho has really come along, um,
mm-hmm.
and will give them something. But the issue with Leicester is just being that they're running out of legs a bit as well, just in regards to having enough players. They've had to be in the spot that they're in, given all of the injuries, is a massive fill up. But there's a lot of pressure on them as well, because
Yeah,
if they lose this game and Liverpool win their last two games and Chelsea win on the weekend in their last game, Leicester are out. And
yeah,
it's the second season in a row that they got 63 points last year, missed the Champions League. They'll have 66 this year and miss out on
yeah,
the Champions League. And I think that would take away from winning the FA Cup. It puts
mm,
that thing on Rodgers about being the nearly man again, and
yeah,
there's a lot riding on this for both teams. It's going to be an enthralling game, and I think a nervy one.
mm,
It's probably going to be one of those games where if you score first, you ain't going to lose. So that
mm,
first goal and the whole sort of Chelsea will have 75% possession. I think Leicester's going to try and hit them on the counter, use the pace up front. Do Chelsea go with Reece James slotting into the defense like they did during the FA Cup? Where's that
yeah,
going to come from that covers that? Um,
yeah,
and that battle to retain possession versus forming that shape when they lose possession. Those moments in transition for Chelsea when they lose
yeah,
possession, and also when they're trying to get into the final third. They're where the games are going to be won and lost.
yeah. Well, I mean, the last time Chelsea and Leicester played was last weekend. It just slipped my mind, but it was the FA Cup final. And just looking at the stats here, and it was a very even game. I mean, it was a boring game in some respects because Chelsea had a lot of the ball. They only had 3 shots. Leicester had the shot. It's an unbelievable goal from Tielemans.
A really
Um,
good goal. Yeah.
yeah, and I
I
think
almost thought, what was he doing there? But he's potentially been their best player this season. He's had a very good year. And he's a young and up and coming talent. He's Belgian, so he's going to be a superstar. So
yeah,
very, very good.
but I just think Leicester might not have it in them to push on these next 2 games, and I don't think they'll make the Champions League because I think they'll lose this game. And if they lose this game, well, I guess mathematically they can still make it. I just don't think they have it in them because there's that little bit of feeling that Liverpool, Chelsea have that kind of, as Mourinho would say, football heritage, where you just feel their manager just knows what it takes to push in and get the third and fourth spot. I won't be surprised. Actually, I'm gonna go for a 1-0, maybe a 2-1, which would be unlikely. A 1-0 Chelsea tonight.
I assume you're saying Chelsea. Yeah. I'll go with the 1-0 to Chelsea. They might nick
Yeah,
a second in the 95th minute,
yeah,
when Leicester throw everybody forward. But
yeah,
I'm going to go with the 1-0. I think Chelsea
yeah,
will have 75% possession and about 4 shots, and it'll be a scruffy goal, and it'll be that sort of game. This is, funnily enough, it could be the biggest Premier League game this season. It could be the game of the season, like in terms of what's riding on it, the rawness.
yeah.
The game is actually scheduled for, what time is it here? Being on the other side of the world, so I'm just trying to find the time. But it's 3:15 in the morning, so I will be getting up to watch that. I'm actually very excited to watch that game.
And
Um,
and 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 the problem with Leicester as well, just in the big picture, they got Spurs next, and that's tough, man. I mean, Spurs are Spurs. They're Spursy, but they're still Spurs. They're a good team. They can go and win a game, and um, Chelsea have Villa, and obviously Man City in the Champions League final. So I just don't think they have enough in them because I've if you would have guessed, you'd guess Rodgers is a pragmatic man. He knows they gave 210% in the FA Cup final. Can I play even close to that level? Probably not. He'll probably set them up for a draw, which they could get, but
a
I just don't
loss,
think it's
a
likely.
loss means that, in my opinion, if they lose, it comes out of their hands. So it doesn't mean they're
Yeah,
not going to make the Champions League, but Chelsea
yeah,
will.
exactly. Yeah,
Liverpool, assuming Liverpool win, which I do think
it's
will happen,
likely.
they will be
Yeah,
on the same points with Leicester with a better goal difference. So it comes out of Leicester's hands if they lose this game.
yeah,
If you told Rodgers 0-0, he'll take that any day of the week. He would
yeah,
absolutely eat your arm off if you offered him 0-0. And
yeah.
they will play for that, and
Hmm.
try and nick one. But a lot of this game is going to be Chelsea's attacking half, and this game's at Stamford Bridge as well. So I do think that
Hmm.
there's going to be fans back at the game. Haven't had fans
Hmm.
for a while, so I think the Chelsea fans
Yeah,
will really be pushing the team on, and Leicester are going to be facing a bit of vitriol for winning the FA
mm,
Cup, and the players not that they're not used to it, they just haven't had it for a while. So that's going to add an element that the Leicester players aren't going to be 100% ready for as well.
It's the same things we saw in the early days of no fans back in back in July last year, where there was a tempo shift. There was a difference to the game, which kind of balanced out. That difference in the game was seen in the reflection of the way Man City played, United played. There was goals being scored, defensive errors all over the place. And I think I was going to bring this point out where I think you'll see that today in the next few weeks, or at least the next 2 weeks, where the fans are back and it's going to be a lot of errors. And in fact, it's going to spill over into the Euros as well. You're going to see a very odd style of football, because combined with the fact like the Euros, you consider like a 2020 kind of game where it's all or nothing. Every game is all or nothing. Combined with fans that plays, no, it's like 2020 cricket where it's exciting, where like it's all or nothing. Every ball is all or nothing. I think it's going to be exciting to watch all the games this weekend with fans back, and let alone this game, which is probably the highlight of the round.
It's interesting because the FA Cup was won by a moment of magic, but I don't think this game will be. This game will be won with a scruffy, off your ass, back of the ass type of goal, that bobbles over the line type thing. Like it's going to be very tense, and potentially very exciting.
And it comes down to what you're saying. Sadly, the FA Cup, and I grew up, the FA Cup was a big deal. Arsenal winning every year, United, Liverpool taking in 2000. I remember that they won a treble. No, it's sad because the money involved getting that fourth space is just far superior to win the FA Cup. And it's, it is what it is. But look, I think this is a huge game this weekend.
Arsenal, for example, Wenger won 7 FA Cups.
Yeah.
But no one went, oh, great, he's the greatest manager of all time for winning. It didn't mean much in the whole context of his history and his story. People talking about, the great football he played, the style that he brought in, but then the team started falling and not qualifying for the Champions League. No one mentions in that narrative that this guy won 7 FA Cups, which is a phenomenal number of of anything to win. That's disappointing, because the FA Cup is, of all the domestic tournaments, domestic cup comps, the biggest in the world.
Absolutely, yeah.
So it's quite sad. And I remember growing up in Australia, we didn't have EPL games. You get the 1 hour highlights package, and you get live.
We got the FA Cup final
games, and you get the FA Cup final.
The FA Cup final, I remember, yeah. The first, I watched it all mostly in Singapore, but the first FA Cup final I watched in Perth was Millwall United 3-0. Tim Cahill played that final.
Yep.
And that was Ronaldo's first ever trophy. I think that was his first ever trophy in professional football. The FA Cup.
Sven-Goran Eriksson gave Ruud van Nistelrooy man of the match, and everyone thought that he was nuts for doing that. Ruud van Nistelrooy actually went and gave the trophy to Ronaldo.
Really?
He thought that Ronaldo deserved it.
Yeah. Anyway, so you're thinking of 1-0 Chelsea. Let's move on then to Liverpool's late charge to fourth. Spectacular kind of finish. They didn't play particularly well against West Brom, I thought. They didn't, they're kind of recovering, like a wounded animal. They just kind of grind out games. And what a finish from Alisson to put him in. For me, they look the best to finish fourth, just because they have nothing left to play for besides that. Leicester kind of have the pressure on them. Chelsea have the Champions League final to look forward to. Liverpool just have to play 2 games, 2 very easy games. What's the second game for Liverpool after this? It is
a team that's playing for the holidays. Yeah.
The last time they played Palace for something that it meant was Kristanbul or Christanbul, when they drew 3-0 back in 2015. But I don't think they'll slip up against Burnley and Palace. I think it'll be very small wins, but they'll get it done.
Look, in regards to playing Burnley, Burnley's they're very up and down. They've had wins and wins and losses. They don't tend to draw a lot of games, and they don't draw a lot. They've had the wins, but they've had a lot of losses as well. The game itself is actually at Burnley. It's not that big of a deal in the sense that Burnley's actually quite close to Liverpool, so it's not like they're going to be traveling from Southampton to Newcastle to go, but there's still a trip involved. Again, the fans coming back. I'm quite interested to see how the Burnley fans react, because the reality is it's their first game in the year and they'll be pumped. The reality is that they've achieved what they want to achieve as a club this season. They'll take 39 points. They'll take 15th on the table. They're quite happy with that. So how Burnley respond, I think, is quite important. I do think the game's going to move into Burnley's defensive third a lot. Liverpool will press high. They'll push. They'll get to that final third, where Liverpool have struggled all season. And Liverpool are a team they've had, 18 wins and 9 draws. Whereas you look at Leicester City, 6 draws, Man City, 5 draws. They haven't been able to turn those draws into wins. At home, they've had a bad run of losses, but away, it's more about turning those draws into wins. And I think that ability to break down that Burnley defence, Burnley have probably England's best keeper, as in the best English keeper in Pope, who I think he'll be an important player in this game, partly organising the defence, but partly his ability to keep out the players. So I actually do think Liverpool will nick it. I don't say that with a great deal of confidence, but I think it's going to be something like this last game where they win it late. It'll be sort of a 2-1 win it late type of thing.
No, I think Liverpool take it comfortably. I have to disagree with you. I think the next 2 games for them are going to be very simple, because I think that United win, it was very cathartic for them. It was you saw they Salah celebrated, and then the second one against West Brom was very. You almost felt, if you saw the celebration, it wasn't manic. It just felt like, we're like, this is what we do. We score in the 90th minute. We did it all of last season. We'll do it again. They're not as good as they were. I'll maintain they're not as good as they were, but they're spiking perfectly at the right time, even though they had such a poor.
It's kind of that team's identity, isn't it? Late winners and that.
Yeah. So I think it'll be that. But I just wanted to make a point. Burnley got very lucky this year. Burnley, Newcastle, Brighton. They got very lucky because the bottom 3, they're safe on 38. Maybe they get 42 points, but that's relegation standard, man.
38, like when I was growing up, you'd want 42, sort of.
42 was the number, yeah.
42 was the number, but that's sort of fallen to like 35, 36.
Okay.
I get the point about 38 being low, and when you compare that, to think that Brighton are on 38 points and are 11 points clear, that's probably more an indictment of that bottom 3.
Exactly.
Very poor bottom 3.
Yeah.
Brighton are on 38. With 2 games left, you'd think they'd still be fighting for survival, but they're well and truly safe. That's more the indictment, I think.
And Brighton, Newcastle had a spike of 5 games where they just played amazing, and they even played really well against Newcastle. But I just wanted to say about Brighton
and played well against Newcastle. You mean Leicester?
I meant City against City. I meant City. The 4-3 game.
Yes,
they lost 4-3.
They also beat Leicester.
Yeah. Exactly. Coming to Brighton and Burnley, I think they're 2 teams that, if it wasn't a top 6 team they're playing against, you'd fancy them against almost every team except for a top 6 team. In fact, you fancy them against Arsenal, so like anyone besides the top 5 even. So I just think they're unlikely to be there. They're one of those clubs that just lack a lot, 1 or 2 pieces of a jigsaw that could really propel them forward.
The only thing Brighton need is a striker. They've had 14 draws in the league. They just can't score enough goals to win. Their record is they had 42 goals conceded. So they've conceded same number of goals as Liverpool. They said the same number of goals as Man United. They've conceded less goals than Leicester City. So it's that ability to nick goals and to win games. They had that striker, the French fella. He's not had particularly good season. Malpe. He's not had a particularly good season. They've been relying on Welbeck, who is a good player, but he's not a natural goal scorer. If they can go and get someone who scores 10, 15, maybe 15 goals, if they can find a 15-goal player, that player is probably worth 15 to 20 points for them, because they seem to have a lot of the other pieces, and teams don't enjoy playing them. They're not physical side. They're more, it's that English good tempo, good passing, pass and move type style. But they just need someone who can smack the ball in the back of the net.
They stick to the basics very well, and they have kind of a sprinkle of European flair to them. Like they like to keep possession, like to be very positive thinking.
It's a touch of finesse.
There is always a touch of finesse, and they're a problem for every team. I'd like to see what they do next season. For me, they'd be Brighton, especially, is a team to look out for. I think Burnley is kind of the opposite, with the same results, where they're a bit more brute force. With Sean Dyche at the helm, that's what you're going to get. But at the same time, it's not.
Aren't they, Burnley?
It's not. But no, I was just going to say it's not a Sam Allardyce kind of team. It's a bit more.
I was referring to the pre-Sam Allardyce West Brom.
Oh yeah. In fact, Burnley and Brighton remind me a lot of Sam Allardyce's old Bolton. When Sam Allardyce was actually a good manager, he had that Bolton team with Ivan Campos and
El Hadji Diouf,
and JJ, and that was a good team. And it's kind of that where it's basic. They stick to the simple stuff, and with a little bit of European or a very African flair. But yeah, look, It's going to be coming back to the race for the fourth place. I mean, obviously Spurs is very much out of it, so it's down to Liverpool, Chelsea, and Leicester. Who do you think takes it, Sham? Just by results, it's
I think Liverpool win both games. I think that gets them into there.
that gets them in, yeah.
I think that Chelsea will beat Leicester. Assuming that they beat Leicester, they'll get the other spot. So it comes down, if Leicester can nick a draw against Chelsea, they'll have Tottenham on the last day of the season. Tottenham have nothing to play for. I think Leicester can get that result if everything is on the line. So it comes down to Chelsea winning at home against Leicester, I think, because Leicester play Tottenham and Chelsea play Aston Villa. So those teams really won't have that much to play for. Probably players trying to get fit for their Euros. Liverpool will have an easier game on paper against Palace. So I actually think it's kind of Liverpool plus the team that's on top after this game, basically.
And I think as well, we look at Spurs versus Leicester. Ryan Mason wants a contract. I think he does. I think he fancies himself the manager, and I think he'll play all out till the last game. Which would segue to a nice point, talking about Ryan Mason and Spurs. We'll go to the next point here, but Kane saying today, I don't know if you've seen the news yet, but it came out maybe 2 hours ago. He's confirmed, he's put his transfer request and he wants to move to a Premier League side.
I'll tell you now, it's strange if you're Harry Kane and you're 27, 28, you're playing in the best years of your career. With all due respect to Ryan Mason, you wouldn't want to play those years under him. So if you're talking about Mason getting that gig, there are players like, would Bale stay on? Would Son stay on? It does raise questions about the direction of the club because Tottenham have had Mourinho, Pochettino. That's the caliber of manager that they've had. Mason, with due respect to him, is not of that caliber yet. Not that he won't be, but he isn't at the moment. So tying that in, it's interesting. Kane's a funny one because I think Levy will screw everything up and make it really hard for Tottenham. Not the other team that he goes to, but for Tottenham. He always sends the at the end of the season.
Selling him too late. They won't get enough replacements, that kind of thing.
They did that with Bale. They didn't really.
They got 11 replacement for the Bale money.
They need to tell him, if you're going to sell Kane, do it before the preseason. Like someone needs to tell him this is what you need to do. I see Kane leaving. The reality is there's only really 3 clubs that could get him. I don't see Liverpool getting him unless they sell Salah. That there is a possibility that Liverpool have to move Salah on. They may look at Kane. I'm not exactly sure if they do though, because Kane's a similar age to a lot of the other players in the team. I think if Liverpool go get a striker, they're probably looking at someone a bit younger. Because even if they sold Salah and they didn't replace him, they still got Jota, Firmino, and Mane, and you can build something with that. Even though Salah is their best goal scorer. Coming back to Kane, you're looking at the 2 Manchester clubs and Chelsea. I don't see him playing for Chelsea because of the rivalry. That seems to be important to him. Although London could attract him, staying in London would probably be a fillip for that. City on paper is the best match because 1, they're an awesome team, and 2, the only position they don't have is a striker who likes running into deep positions and then running forward. So, he's the type of player that could go to City, score 40 goals, and win the Champions League with them. United is, if he's got an inkling for United, it's interesting because I do think he and Bruno Fernandes would be absolutely phenomenal. Just their ability. They're both one likes going high, one likes going deep. The way that they jink and jive with the wide players.
Scholes said when he had it, the best striker connection he ever had was with Louis Saha. And he said all he did was look in Louis Saha's eyes. Like he could see his eyes and knew what he was going to do. And Louis Saha says the same about Scholes. I mean, everyone says that about Scholes, but for Scholes to give you the praise, that's a different story. And you could see that
when you consider Bruno Saha didn't really have that great career at United because he kept getting injured. And you think of the players that Scholes played with at United, that is massive praise.
That's huge praise. Huge praise.
And Roy, Ronaldo, Cork, Yol, Solskjaer, Sheringham, Cantona, Hughes.
Praise.
Jeez.
Yeah. And I don't think he leaves in the summer. I don't think he leaves. I think if he pushes to go overseas, he'll leave very quickly. I just don't see him. I don't see Levy letting him go.
The safest option for him is City. If he goes,
there's one thing.
I think it's City, but
there's one thing letting Michael Carrick. There's one thing letting Michael Carrick and Berbatov go to a Premier League club, or off the top of my head, I can't think of one. Or Ledley King. Oh, not Lee King, sorry, Sol Campbell, but Daniel Levy wasn't Sol Campbell at the time. But there's Berbatov, who's
Scott Campbell walked
my
out.
one of yeah, Berbatov is my favorite player of all time. But and then there's Harry Kane, who guarantees you 40 goals and assists a year. There's levels to this game, and I just don't see him going to Premier League club. I see him going to Madrid, genuinely. I see Allegri taking over. I see a Galactico project, a style, at least a mini Galactico is coming.
I think he's a perfect replacement for Benzema, but I can't see them playing together. So you probably have to move Benzema on, or would you play both of them up front?
I mean, Benzema's been in the form of his life. It's not talked about enough how good he's been this season.
He's actually become that franchise player for that team.
Benzema's been called up to the squad, the French squad, for the Euros after 5 years out because of got called up today. Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
If you didn't, I was actually kind of leaning towards Portugal winning the Euros. I thought France might have a hangover, but with Benzema on the squad, it's just that's huge.
Benzema and Mbappe.
Yeah. And then Pogba and Kante behind them, Griezmann on the left. I don't know who cares who plays on the right. Fekir maybe on the right. I don't know. Valbuena.
You hear about Laporte? Laporte decided to go play for Spain because he couldn't get a game.
I saw that.
Yeah,
I saw that. Yeah.
That's how good the French.
It was quite recent. It was a couple of days ago. I saw that.
Yeah, less than a week ago. Yeah.
Last thing I want to talk about, Sean, before we finish off, is King Cantona was inducted as the third inductee into the Hall of Fame. I think we talked about this briefly, but I don't think there was two better inductees into the Hall of Fame than Shearer and Thierry Henry. I think they kind of built the Premier League into what it is today. I don't think Cantona built the Premier League, but he built United. He is, call him kind of one of the founding fathers of what United is today, alongside Matt Busby and those kind of characters. What is this the right appointment? Do you think at the right time, or do you think someone else deserves an appointment right now over Cantona?
I do think. I know I'm a United man, but I do think that United probably needed that one. I mean, they've won half of all the Premier Leagues, so you'd think that you'd need a player from that team. If you were just to go that and say pick one United player, I'm probably thinking Roy Keane would be the one.
Keane, yeah, I was thinking Keane as well. But he was just a touch before Cantona, so I think as far as timelines go.
Classic example of not around for a long time, but a good time. And it's interesting that they've gone that way because, like, you look at Shearer, for example. Part of the reason Shearer is there is because of that longevity. But clearly with Cantona, that's not the case. But it shows he left a powerful legacy with the club. A lot of those younger players looked up to him massively. I mean, even someone like Roy Keane, who was always all about hard work and all that. He knew Cantona had his eccentricities, but never faltered the way that Cantona's professionalism. So I think he's a worthy player to get up there. Do I think that there are others that could have potentially been picked? Yeah, I think Keane or Scholes or someone like that was probably Keane would probably get in before Scholes, because for me, growing up watching the Premier League, it was Keane v Vieira. And I think that I'd love to see the two of them get put in at the same time, because to me, that's what the Premier League was. I get that Henry's a brilliant player, Shearer was a brilliant player, but for me, the Premier League was Keane versus Vieira, and I'd love to see them both get in. And maybe they might save that. I don't know, but if you're asking me, I would have gone for Roy Keane.
Well, like rightfully so, you have to go era by era. Like for example, I think Aguero will get in. He's a Premier League legend. There's no two ways about Aguero. He's a Premier League legend.
Eventually, yeah.
Arguably the most iconic moment in Premier League history. But he's not going to be for about another 10 years, because that's just the timeline we're in. So you're right. I think Keane will get in. He's going to be the next 3 to 4 waves of inductees. He'll be in there somewhere. But it would be nice to see him and Vieira together.
We did a video a year ago. Like, we picked 11 players and the manager to get in.
Yeah.
I think the Premier League might actually go that way, but they'll layer it. I think they'll. I have a feeling they'll start with an 11 because obviously number of football players and that sort of thing. Aguero's an interesting one. I want to ask you Alan Shearer. He obviously had a massively long career. It was 0.46 goals a game, and he's third in terms of that sort of goals per game.
Oh, is Aguero on top?
So Aguero and Henry are at the top. And they're about, I don't know the exact number, but you're looking at 0.67, 0.69 goals a game. Henry obviously was young, Monaco, Juventus, played his best years in Arsenal and left. Aguero, young at Madrid and Argentina, and playing for Argentina, best years at City, and it looks like he's going to Barcelona. So they've both played the best years of their career, where Shearer kind of played his entire career in England. I believe Henry is a better player than Aguero. Aguero has a
Mm,
great eye for goal. He's developed himself and he's made himself useful to Guardiola, who doesn't really seem to like him that much as a footballer.
mm,
There's something about Aguero that seems to rub Guardiola the wrong way because he doesn't get as much time as he should. You'd think
mm,
because, like you said, his goals to he's good enough to be for me. Those three, Shearer, Henry, and Aguero, are probably the three best strikers to have played in the Premier League. But Aguero doesn't, in my opinion, get put on the same pedestal as those two. So I wanted to ask you why you think that is.
mm. That's a very good question, man. Maybe there is a theory of if Rooney had a full head of hair and his name was Fernando, he would be considered a Premier League great when he was playing. And I think it's a lot to do with that. He's not there's the physical visual bias of him being the short, scrawny fella. There is the fact that he came in at a time, no one said the words Yaya, Aguero, company, David Silva for Premier League greats in the Hall of Fame. Like no one's really talked about it a lot in terms of social media and YouTube because they came into a team that was bought with a lot of money. If you think about Chelsea's, if you think about who, if I said who should get in for Chelsea, you're going to say Lampard or John Terry. You're not going to say Drogba.
I was going to say
Am I
Terry.
right?
I'd
Yeah,
say,
exactly. My point being, they represent something that like fans never really liked. Fans, who no one's given a shit that City's won the league, man.
yeah,
United coming second was a bigger deal. You saw the celebrate. I don't know if you saw videos of celebration last week when they won the league because United lost. It's like there's about 100 fans there. I just don't think people care. I think they're great. I think for me, Aguero is like when Drogba used to play against United or Thierry Henry against United. Like, you're like, oh my god, we're going to play City tomorrow. Aguero's going to rip us apart. And I'm sure the defenders thought the same thing. They were actually playing, but yeah, that's literally why. That's what I think. And I think Thierry Henry came to an Arsenal, came to a came into a revolution by Wenger. And you cannot doubt that Wenger revolutionized the way we think about football.
with
Before Pep
Thierry
even did.
Henry, he was underperforming at Juventus. He was playing on the
Yeah,
left wing. Wenger's like, this guy's a striker. Henry scored 2 goals in his first 2 games, then didn't score for 6 months. And he was missing open
really.
goals. And everyone's like, this guy can't play striker. What are you
Yeah,
thinking, Arsene Wenger? And then he becomes
yeah,
the jewel in the
yeah,
crown. And
yeah.
Shearer had that redemption story. Cantona was probably the best purchase ever in the Premier League era. Like
There's a reason why.
yeah.
There's a reason why the Invincibles will always be arguably the greatest single side ever. It's because they were truly a footballing team. They were invincible. They weren't bought. Well, they were bought. They weren't
It
Man
wasn't
City
big
bought. They
money.
weren't.
Those are really good deals in there.
It
Like
was a team that was. People forget this concept of like managers. They're not just to manage and pick the 11. They're there to make players better, to coach players, to make young players better, or to make older players think better. And that's what Wenger did, man. That's why for me, Thierry Henry, just a gift.
you
His
look at
goal against you. Sorry, one second. His goal against United when he had his back on Dennis Irwin, flicked the ball up on the same leg, pivoted, put the ball. It wasn't even a shot. It was just a dink over Barthez. It's artistry, man. It's what Matt Letizia could never do. You know.
let's
Anyway,
just
sorry. Go on.
no, I was just gonna say, what was I gonna say? I just that Arsenal team, that team wasn't about the sums of money spent on players. Like you said, it was
Yeah.
about play development. Like Yaya Toure was bought as a winger. Sorry, Kolo Toure was bought as a winger and got put in centre of defence.
Okay, I didn't know
Ashley
that.
Cole was a
Jesus.
good player. Laurent was not. I don't think he was a particularly good player, but he had a role. He was sort of the Gary Neville of his team.
Yeah.
The way that they put pieces together was to a philosophy, and the development of the players within that is sort of what you remember about that. Like even
Yeah.
sort of the class of '92 was about the youngsters being developed, and I suppose, like you said with City, because they're spending 50, 60 million pounds a player, I think that they are being developed into really good players. But it's different saying that about a player bought for £3 million and a player bought for £50 million. It's just
Mm.
it's a different narrative. Um,
And another thing about Henri Sham, don't mind me, sorry, is that I come from the school of thought of football where players are always going to be better than players of old. Like I'll give the example. I was giving the example of Danny Ings. Danny Ings is a better player than Ian Rush will ever be, but not a better player of his time. Not the best player of his time. He has to be. He has to be leaner, faster, stronger because football develops that way.
I mean, the
You know,
facilities get better, the technology gets better, the recovery
yes.
gets better.
For you to even for you to even think Kevin De Bruyne is not a better player than Cantona, you've got to be out of your fucking mind. Like Thierry Henry would have survived every generation of football. He would be the best player in the world right now. Exactly how he played then, he played now. He would have adjusted his game, and I've no doubt people like him, I don't know, potentially Giggs, potentially Frank Lampard would have adjusted their game. But Thierry Henry is just at the pinnacle of pure talent. In my opinion, like the Ronaldinhos of the world, where they just excite you to watch. And that's I think he's unbelievable.
Think of Henry jinking on the left. You sort of had sort of the high chest, and the foot was sort of with the ball, and you just there was that tingle where you was like, what's he gonna do now? You know.
There's a free kick he scores, and the ref kind of fucks around with like where to put the ball, and he hits it, bang, goal, first time. It's a 35-yard free kick, and he looks over to the ref and he goes, "Is that enough? Is that enough?" Like he brought something that no one else did since maybe Cantona.
He was the epitome of that that French sort of swagger and arrogance, that caricature of French, like Aragon, like that, that way, that stereotype. But you talk to him, he's just a massive chilled out fella, like touchable football brain. When you see him on those shows like the Sky Sports, the Monday Night Football stuff, such a great football brain.
It's a shame that his footballing brain hasn't been transferred properly as a manager. He did very well with Belgium as a number 2 to Martinez, but it's just not clicked for him as a proper manager. So and it comes down to
sorry, go on.
So I think it just comes down to, Gary Neville says it well, when you want to be a manager, that's all you can be. There's no Sky Sports, there's no investments, there's no buying this team, buying that team. All you have to do is be a manager. And I think Gary Neville hits the nail on the head quite well there. I think if Thierry Henry is ever to be a manager, or any of these players to ever go back to managing, all they have to think about is managing.
Yeah, and I think that I think one of the things as well is that it can be hard for great players to become managers, because they almost expect, why are these people not thinking the way that I think? Sometimes it's players that have maxed out their ability that become better managers because they can show people how to max out their ability. Like Ferguson had a good playing career, didn't have a great one, but there's not a lot of great players who become great managers. And I think a lot of football management nowadays is about managing the people. You've got people from all different parts of the world. You've got people like high wages, high expectations. They live quite sheltered lives because clubs pamper them and put them in cotton wool. And you've got the professors, but sometimes I think if Thierry Henry was to coach at a level where like, say he's a manager of a women's team, and I say that because women's teams at the moment aren't getting paid quite the same, and there's not so much scrutiny, and he can focus on the actual coaching and the philosophy, then I think that would work. And I suppose Pep Guardiola's been criticized for not being the best manager and more of a tactician, but City deliberately put structures around him and brought in all the people that he wants to make that work. And I think Thierry Henry, it might be that sort of getting his ideas across type thing as opposed to his football brain. That ability to communicate as a manager is really important. And that's something that Ferguson was really good at.
Someone never quite played well.
Roy Keane would just say, he'd give you a look and you know exactly what he was thinking,
Yeah. Or you didn't.
Roy Keane said, like, he did play like rubbish in the first half, and he came off and he's like, Ferguson's just going to bollock me like in front of the whole team. And Ferguson just looked at him and went, Roy. And Roy Keane was just like, it was the worst thing that Roy Keane did. Like, he was so fired up after Ferguson went, Roy.
Yeah. Anyway, should we wrap it up there, Sham? It's a nice 45 minutes.
Yeah, let's wrap it up there.
Lovely.
Those games are going to be very exciting. I'm really looking forward to Leicester versus Chelsea, even though it's going to be a boring 1-0 win to Chelsea.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a very gripping, edge of the seat type game.
Yeah. And just play of the round, any of the games or a moment of the round?
I think in that Chelsea game, I'm not going to go for one. I'm going to go for Ndidi versus Kante. So Kante versus Kante 2.0. I think that battle is going to be a big battle in that game. The disruptor of Chelsea's tempo is going to be Ndidi, and I think on the other side, Kante seems like he was massive in the Champions League semi-final
against Madrid.
He's that player. He's the World Cup winner. He's the player who knows how to deliver. I think that even though he doesn't seem to have the level of importance under Frank or Tuchel, is that how you say it? Tuchel, yeah. It doesn't seem that level important.
It's actually pronounced Tuchel. Tuchel,
Tuchel, sorry. So it doesn't seem to have that level of importance that you would associate with the player of his ability, but I think that battle is going to be a big battle in that game.
I like that. I think for me, I think you're going to see a goal rush from Liverpool. I don't think it's going to be a neat little 1-0. So I think any of the front three for Liverpool are going to be important. I'll just put Salah in there, but I think it's going to be a good game for Liverpool. A bit of confidence back, and you know what? And you know what?
I want to ask you quickly because Mane didn't play against United, had a bit of a sulk. So who do you think Salah will play with?
I think it'll be Mane. I think Klopp loves a little bit.
Mane and Firmino?
Yeah, I think it'll be the normal front three. And I just want to say this: as much as it's been fun to see Liverpool not play well, you know, we can do a whole episode on, you know, they have had bad situations. They've had Alisson's mother passed away, Klopp's mother as well passed away, Alisson's father. So they've had just a kind of wave of bad luck. But I would love to see them compete again next year. It's just it's not that fun.
I've no doubt they will. They'll need one or two players, but they'll
3 or 4 games you lose, it's kind of like you laugh at Liverpool. Afterwards, it's like, this is shit, man. I want Liverpool competing. I want every club competing, but except for Spurs, because they just can't compete. So on that note, thanks so much for watching, guys. Great to be back, Sham. We are the 5 Yard Pass podcast. My name is Suddy. This is Sham. Keep football simple, and as always,
keep passing, guys. Cheers.